It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name is George Cooper and welcome to the show. Another frustrating night in Southwest 6 as Manchester United once again headed back to the northwest and various points across Surrey with 3 points from Craven Cottage. We've seen it so many times in recent years, turgid games that we just about edged, but a late deflected goal from Alistair Martinez meant that we went home empty-handed. Let's be honest, it was a pretty boring game that probably deserved to be a draw. Didn't play that well. But what is it about this Fulham side and struggling against sides lower than us in the table? First Ipswich, then Wolves, then Southampton, and now Manchester United. We despair. In spite of the game, there's still plenty to talk about. The Traore-Martinez battle, issues with the atmosphere, and our misfiring front line are very much on the agenda today. Joining me to discuss the above and much more is Mr. Adam Farquharson, AF. How you doing, mate?
All good. Thanks, George. How are you?
I'm all right. Could be better, but,
Good.
We move. I'm also joined by Mr. Charlie Kipp, who's joining us live from Florida, I believe. He's our statesman, our friend across the pond. How you doing, Charlie?
Coops, I'm all right. I wish the warm weather would make me feel a bit better, but the result is all that really carries my emotions at the moment.
Oh, anyway, it's always good to talk about it on the podcast. You come in feeling pretty miserable, having to watch the highlights again, thinking, oh God. And then, after a solid hour of discussing it with friends, everything becomes that little bit easier. I'm also joined by Drew Heatley. How you doing, man? You good?
Hi, George. Yeah, I think yesterday sort of sparked a bit of an existential crisis among the fan base, hasn't it? The whole sort of lead up and result, and everybody's sort of questioning now what's the point in this season? What's the point in even being alive when we can no longer dream? It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it?
Yeah, sort of Premier League induced nihilism is the only way that I can describe it. Following last night's game. AF, what were the 3-word reviews saying? Any ones to lift our spirits, or were they all similarly despairing?
We can lift our spirits with a bit of laughing at negativity, but there's not a huge amount than that. We've got LB with load of manure, Battalion with cottage blending red, which is a reference to the amount of Manchester United fans that made their way into home areas. We've got Topias Ninivara with deflected and deflated. And these aren't 3-word reviews, but I'm not actually on X a huge amount of time, but I decided to go on there, and some jokes write themselves. I just thought I'd have to read them out because they've clearly got very angry, and if it's not read out, we could be in trouble. So this is Alex Stemp with, there's a lot to unpack here. Silva right, no luck, but trying to replace Mitro might help. It's a riddle in itself, isn't it? Like, there's so much to unpick. I feel like he's writing a prophecy for the future. He's got it 100% right. Silva right, no luck, but trying to replace Mitrovic might help. I agree with him. At Angry Little Man 1, they were there for the taking. We were shite tonight.
I think that's all we've got time for the Fulhamish podcast today. Thank you very much to my guests, Drew Heatley, Charlie Kipp and AF. I don't think there's really much more to discuss, is there? No? Sums it up pretty much perfectly, to be honest. Drew, it was just an incredibly boring match, totally forgettable. I mean, we met up for a beer beforehand and you said that you felt that there was too much pressure on us to finally beat United at home after 15 years. Your words were, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. And do you stand by that feeling beforehand that you had?
100%, mate. We were victims of the narrative going into the game because, it's exactly that. Like, we're on a hiding to nothing, really. If we beat Man United yesterday, then congratulations, you beat the worst Manchester United team in history. The soundbite delivered by their own manager. And of course, then if you don't, which, as Jack pointed out in the Thursday Club, is completely possible because despite their league position, they're still completely able to pull out a performance or two. Not that they necessarily did yesterday, but, they're United and this is what they do. You lose and then you've lost to the worst team in history. So, yeah, it was too much, and we were sort of choked by that narrative, I thought. And we talk about this, but I don't think we offered up anywhere near enough to beat any iteration of any Manchester United side in the last 30 years. It wouldn't have troubled any of them yesterday because it wasn't. There just simply wasn't enough from us, was there?
No, not at all. I think on balance, Charlie, a draw would have been a fair result. Manchester United were really poor, I thought, and it took a fluky deflected goal to eventually get past us. But on the flip side, I don't really think we offered all that much. And there were missed chances. I'm thinking from Muniz, and Adama had an opportunity as well. But it was one of those where we didn't deserve to lose, but probably didn't deserve to win either.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's to have a match under the circumstances where it is among the most floundering United sides of this century, arguably. And if you look at their whole form, I know they have had ups and downs for a decade and a half, but this is about the best time you could have gotten at them. I think, they had their good matches, whether it was the Manchester Derby, the match against Liverpool, etc. That team did not show up. This was a team that was completely gettable. It was the Manchester United we thought they were. And I don't think we tested Onana once. And I'm sure he had a save or two on the stat sheet, but in terms of really tested him, the best bit was Andersen's kind of header that was cleared off the line, which was a brilliant play. But in terms of throughout the balance of the match, we didn't test him. And I think that is ultimately, for me, a reflection of what that was, and disappointing massively.
Yeah, certainly was disappointing. AF, do you agree with the sentiment that this was like a huge opportunity missed? Man U played on Thursday. We've had 8 days rest. I just feel like it didn't, Sammy sort of mentioned this in the quick take, but it didn't feel like Fulham were the team that had all that rest. And yeah, I guess a lot of discourse after the game, particularly online, has been, that's kind of our European dreams realistically over if you can't take these opportunities when they come up. Do you feel that is true?
I do. To be honest, every time it feels as though we come back from what should be a positive time for Fulham. So you come back from an international break, we sometimes look and we go, do you know what, we've got some key players back. We very rarely just come back and go, yeah, we're going to perform at the highest level and absolutely smash it. I get worried whenever that happens. Whenever we have something hanging over us, and I actually call it hanging over us, rather most teams would say, oh, this is in our favour. As soon as something's hanging over us, like, we've got more rest than they do, we should be the more informed team. This is why this podcast is called Fulhamish. We're here to speak about why things go wrong when they should go right. And I think it's our European dreams over, but I say European dreams, we're clearly not ready for European football, because you imagine us, if we were playing Thursday, Sunday, and then we would absolutely fall apart in the Premier League as well. That could be a negative way of looking at it, but I think it's about trying to get the club ready for it. And we're not ready at this point in time because we can't consistently perform at the level that's required. Otherwise, we'd be in 7th place, not looking at teams below us like Manchester United, thinking, oh, do you know what? We're not going to get a result here. And we'd be confident about getting a result against them. We didn't approach the game in a way that a team that is completely confident of beating Manchester United would do. I think we gave them too much respect. We were playing in front of their back five when really the only player that looked, well, there were two players that looked like they were really getting at Manchester United, Alex Iwobi and Harry Wilson. One of them obviously got completely crocked. And I think when you've only really got Alex Iwobi seriously posing them a threat, whilst in the first half that looked dangerous, they worked it out. And it just became a game of not even cat and mouse. It was just two mice looking at each other thinking, is one of you just going to muck up here? And that's exactly what we did.
It's a beautiful analogy, AF, and one that I have to agree with, I would say. The thing is with this Fulham side, Drew, is that I'm not worried about our defence at all. I'm not worried about our sort of now centre mid pairing in Lukic and Berger, who I thought were, generally like pretty good yesterday. I'm worried about us going forward because we seem to be running out of ideas and growing increasingly stale, really. It's the same old kind of patterns of, Iwobi breaking down the left, Robinson on the overlap, and then sort of half arse ball that easily gets cleared, Jimenez chasing everything down, but like not really having much luck. And then on comes Muniz. You think, oh, he's just going to mix it up, and then doesn't really make an impact, spurns a couple of chances. It feels like we're falling into a bit of a pattern. ESR going a little bit missing. And I don't know, it feels like maybe we need a bit of a shake-up. And I don't know, how do you see us breaking out of this rut going forward? Because we are struggling to find goals, especially in open play.
Yeah, I think stale is the word, isn't it? I think, we have to be on our absolute best to be getting something out of games at the moment, which you can see evidenced by our unbeaten run. That was mostly draws. We're kind of in this strange. We're in that sort of mid-table purgatory where, you know, we're far too good to be in any sort of danger, but we're not good enough to be challenging anywhere higher. And you can see that in games at the moment. And it's, you know, how do you shake it up? You know, Marco's been wed to his system since day one. And, you know, at Fulham Football Club, we've been pretty much throughout managers wed to that 4-3-3 and different iterations of it for, you know, the last 6, 7, 8 years. You know, root and branch reform like that takes a long time, and you're not going to be getting it mid-season. So what do you do now? I'm not sure, which I think is where that existential sort of challenges have come from that I mentioned earlier, where, you know, I think we all are looking ahead to May thinking, well, nothing really can change very drastically between now and May. So are we just destined to sort of limp towards the finish line? I mean, that's not to say that we're not going to have any impressive results or performances between now and May, but we're not going to have that consistency that you know, a Bournemouth or a Forest have been able to gather this season. And Forest have managed to do it through you know, huge blanket recruitment, which the consequences of which are yet to be realised. And Bournemouth have managed to do it through some shrewd recruitment of young players and a manager who's managed to tie it all together. Now, we've got a manager who is, you know, definitely one of the better ones in the Premier League, and that's fantastic. But I just don't think he's got the tools in the toolbox in terms of the players. We haven't got the squad depth, you know, to take us to that next level. So, you know, it's a case of summer, putting hands in pockets, and investing in the squad. We've never replaced Mitrovic. We've replaced Polinia with 2 players, as I've said before. You know, there's more that needs to be done to take us to that next level, and I think that's where it all comes from, that staleness, and that doesn't seem to look like it's going to be able to be changed anytime soon.
Drew, you mentioned our former Serbian friend there, and the fact that we haven't replaced him, and it's something that is true. We don't at the moment have that player within our squad who can just pull something out of the bag, like drag you to a victory, and really, we don't, like, for want of a better term, a talisman. Really, is we have an incredibly gifted squad. I would argue the best squad Fulham have had comfortably since 2010, maybe even, you know, pound for pound better, you know, if you take into consideration how far the Premier League has come and so on. But it's just that hole that we have. And I don't know whether I think that it could just be as simple as we need to find that replacement, that talismanic centre forward. And then I think that is the missing piece of the puzzle. Do you think it's quite that simple as I do, or do you think it's a little bit more complicated than that?
I think Marco's squeezing all of the juice out of the fruit that he has. You know, we've given him some props about how he's managed to rotate Muniz and Jimenez around this season, and you know, somebody's rightly said, you know, if we had a striker who'd got their combined 11 goals, whatever it is, then we'd be fairly happy. But that is really making them operate on full capacity, and that's not good enough to take you from 10th to 7th, and the gap is widened. You can see that. So yes, there is Mitrovic, but then there's also strength and depth on the wings, right? You know, Harry Wilson's had some fantastic performances since Brentford, yeah, granted, but you know, him and Adama Traore, if you combine both of their skills together, you'd have one player that I think would help us get to 7th, but you need 2 or 3 of those in each position, and we just don't have it. And that's the levels that we're sort of behind right now. And that's 1 or 2 or maybe 3 transfer windows worth of recruitment. So it's like, how long's the runway before we can take it to that next level? Because at the moment we're not there.
It's also we need to look at our recruitment in a way that we need to prepare for a season like this has in terms of injuries. We have had so many seasons where we have really just skated through. We have 1 or 2 injuries and we've got the squad depth for those injuries. This season, we've been hit by everything. Not everything yet. You know, we could still get an injury to Bernd Leno. Sorry, that's me tempting fate. But if we plan for the injuries that we've had this season, you can see we recruited Reece Nelson immediately injured pretty much. As soon as he started to get up some form, we've had several injuries to Harry Wilson. We luckily haven't had an injury to Alex Iwobi. We have had injuries to Emil Smith-Rowe. But you add all of these up, we haven't had that in previous seasons. And we need to plan for the eventuality that we might have 3 or 4 injuries on the wing. And if we have wingers / attacking midfielders, anyone in the squad that is unhappy because they're not playing, they're at a Premier League club, they're there in case these things happen. People do get opportunities. And if Fulham have a season where we do not get injuries and our first team is playing pretty much like it was last season, that's a benefit for the club overall, even if we're paying for our transfer policy to try and make sure that we've got that cover. But at the minute, I think it is exactly what we're saying. We are light in numbers, but we were planning as if we were like, cool, we've got our starting players. We seem pretty happy as a squad. We can then add in a Mitrovic player and we'll start to build from there. But the injuries have meant that we've kind of been readjusting the squad depth all season, it feels.
We've jumped two-footed into some pretty existential topics here. Let's have a little reverse and pay some attention to the game. And speaking of jumping two-footed, one of the rare bits of excitement from yesterday's game was the battle between Adama Traore and Martinez. So in the reverse fixture, for those who've been living under a rock for the last couple of days, there was a tussle between Manchester United's Argentinian centre-back and our Dench matador, Adama Traore, in which Martinez shoved him off the ball and then had a little pop with him in the post-match interview saying, I sent him to the gym. And then they had a little exchange of words on social media. So everyone was kind of anticipating this matchup. And for fleeting moments, it looked as if we were genuinely going to get a scrap, you know? Adama Traore looked like he was up for it and did, I think, look very exciting when he came on. He had no issue with running with the ball. He was causing a nuisance of himself using his power. Martinez then jumped two-footed, and I'm talking like a standing jump into a tackle on Traore, just on the edge of the area. It was about the 61st minute, right in front of Anthony Taylor, the referee, decided to take no action. Martinez then it transpired that he came out of the tackle worse because obviously Traore is an absolute tank. But if you look at the replay and slow it down, it's undeniably a two-footed challenge, Charlie. Do you think that Martinez was lucky to be on the pitch? Because, I mean, they said that VAR checked it and they were happy with Anthony Taylor's decision and that it didn't warrant enough for a red card. But you've seen games in which they have been given. It felt like it was preempted. It felt nasty. It felt like it could have been a red. What did you think when it happened?
There's no way that wasn't a worse challenge than what Lewis Skelly was sent off for Arsenal earlier in the weekend. There's just I refuse to accept that for a half second. I think it's also a disadvantage, arguably, to Adama that he's such a tank that I think if he was a more slight player and went down, I think that is perceived completely differently by the players who, I think a bit of it was that it's one of those where we've now done a bit of retrospective justice on it, and justice is the word here. I think I'm glad we're talking about it, but I think in the moment I sort of noticed it, but I don't recall getting up out of my chair at home being like, oh my God, like in real time upon a replay. Sure, of course. But I think it's because Adama's, so big and sturdy that he didn't really absorb or react to the full force of the challenge the way a mere mortal typically would. And I think it worked against him in that moment, and surprised that upon looking at it further, nothing was given there. And it was a massive disadvantage. I think, by all the laws of the game, something should have been given there, and I felt hard done. And I just quickly want to touch, while we're on Adama, I did think he brought a spark. I think when he came on, it felt like it energized us a little bit. I mean, we were looking good in the first 10, 15 minutes of the match with Harry and with Iwobi. And I think when you flip Iwobi out to the right, he seemed to vanish a lot in that second half for me. Whether that's, and I know his ability is to play all over, but I just felt like his impact was far more limited on the right side of the pitch. And also, I think, and I'm not breaking any new ground here, but I think it bears repeating that the overlap that Iwobi and Robinson have is incredible. And I think you definitely lose a lot of that with Adama coming on, the way he works with Anthony's skill set. Which it just brings a lot of questions, but ultimately I've digressed. And to your point, should have been a red for me. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but sorry. I think you look at it, that is what it is.
It's annoying because you see all this sort of back and forth and, we'll meet again, all this kind of stuff. But I mean, like, if they were to have a fight, Adama wins hands down. There's no question, is there?
Oh, yeah.
You got a guy who looks like a human mixed with a Shetland pony pushing somebody who looks like prime Dwayne Johnson, and you just think like the ball's on you to do that in the first place, and you're doing that because you're surrounded by players who will get in the way. But there's no justice in football, is there? That then he goes ahead and gets this fluky deflected winner based on his shithousery. I just can't get my head around that lack of justice. But Charlie, you're completely right in terms of the tactical elements and the disadvantages of having Adama on. But I just think yesterday what we were lacking was that little bit of needle before he came on. We seemed to have a game plan, fine, and we were working through it. But the game was devoid of any real passion until that little rivalry was reignited, as petty and as pathetic as it might be. So maybe it would have been an idea to have looked at putting Adama on from the start if we can maybe accommodate and free up some of the deficiencies that as you rightly pointed out, but because it was just lacking any sort of needle, isn't it, at all? And that was part of the problem. We just didn't have that gumption about us.
Yeah.
Until the final 10-15 minutes, right? I mean, that's the thing. It was, I think, a 7-year-old watching that match would have said, "Oh, look, we're really trying here," down the stretch towards the end. And it doesn't take a team of us to kind of identify that. Look, it's obviously once you've been scored against, human nature is you're going to put your foot on the gas. But it begs the age-old question that we've asked 10 years ago, we'll ask 10 years from now, which is why not just come out with that amount of fortitude and that gumption earlier on? You're playing at home. We haven't won a home match in the league since December 5th against Brighton. Like that is not the form we need to be in. And I think part of it just comes down to a bit of aggression. Quite frustrating.
Incredibly frustrating. I mean, the goal was just typical of this fixture, really, AF. Deflected in off Sasha Lukic. You could tell from the second that the ball went in the air that it was deflected, just the way it was dipping. I don't think there's really much more than to say about it. Do you think perhaps Bernd Leno could have done better? We've had a few questions asking, well, a question, not a few, but I personally don't agree with it. I just think it was just incredibly unlucky, really.
I think the thing is, Sasha Lukic goes and closed him down pretty well. Could have closed him down better, so we got a more serious touch on the ball than a deflection. But we also have a go at players for not even getting a touch on the ball and not getting close at all. So well done, Sasha, for getting something on the ball. Unfortunately, in this instance, it's caused that. In most instances, it's probably pinging over the bar or it's just going out of play. It's actually saving us on more occasions. In this situation, it is fluke. But we look at this fixture and we look at the kind of last 20 minutes and when we look at conceding goals. And it's not... What's frustrating about this, I think, is that it's not really that we took our eye off the ball particularly. It was a bit of a freak accident. And that makes it even worse because of the player that scored it. From a Bernd Leno perspective, I've had my criticisms of him in recent weeks, but I don't think this is one of them, because actually I think if he's expecting the shot to come in, he's probably looking for right, I can comfortably deal with this without a problem. But it's literally the deflection. You see his face change. It basically just goes really white. And he just jumps for it and he knows he's not getting there. But even with the touch on it, you think he gets a slight fingertip on it. It's always going to drop in that goal and ruin our day. And it had to be him, didn't it? I think there wasn't a player on that pitch that I could have gone through. If that had been Garnacho, I still would have been angry. If it would have been Fernandez, I would have been like, here we go again. The fact it's Martinez on a day like that, it just had to be.
Yeah. It was so annoying. Like watching the highlights beforehand, I managed to keep it in, and it's just like, why is it every time we play Manchester United at home? And it's. I mean, you mentioned it up top, Drew. It's that they just have it in their locker. They've got quality, right? And they just pop up with it. I'm going to talk about the chances that Muniz spurned. The first one came from the opportunity where Andersen was cleared off the line, I believe. Then the ball remained in play and the ball came in and Muniz was met on the outside of the area and he kind of like hit the ball directly into the ground and it sort of went over. Now, at the time I thought, it looks like, I wasn't really sure there was too much in it, Drew. But upon rewatching it, I think he has to do better there. He has to at least hit the target. Do you agree?
Yeah, and again, people have said, what if we'd had Jimenez on at that point? And it's one of those things where Muniz is really good. He puts himself in positions where, he can do things. But when it doesn't come off, it's like he comes in for criticism. I just think what it comes down to for me is that you've got two halves of a striker at the level that we need, and you're right. He should have done more, but that's almost is that as much as we can expect from somebody like Roddy Muniz at this point? I don't know.
He's a bit of a moments player though, right? So there's moments, I'd use the bicycle kick at Sheffield United. There's moments from him. I know he tries 15 bicycle kicks, but when he tries these things, that's, as you say, that half of the player. When he does try these shots, I think he only has 20 minutes as well. I think I'm not saying we start him, by the way, but you put him over 90 minutes. Mitrovic missed a lot of chances. I think Muniz misses a lot of chances, but he is starting to feel the pressure again of it being those 20 minutes. He's got this record that, I only score against massive clubs, or used to be massive clubs, but I score against those clubs. And then it makes it a little bit difficult because when he's on in those 20 minutes, he'll try the spectacular, but there's a lot of pressure on him to get it right. Whereas he just forgets to do the simple things. Like with either of those chances, to be honest, if he even side foots it, he's got half a chance, but he snatches at both of those because he's just trying to put as much power in it to score an absolute worldie. Whereas really what he needs to do is just be a bit more clinical, but also composed. I think he massively misses composure, which Jimenez does have composure, as you say. We just need a mix of those two players. And at the minute, we just don't have that.
Yeah, I think that word is the key word there, AF. I agree with composure, because he had that other opportunity where the ball kind of came off Kobbie Mainoo's backside. He had the back to the goal and he just swings his leg at it and it goes right to the back of the Hammersmith end. And at the time, you're thinking, okay, there's a lot of bodies in the way. But again, watching it back, he needs to hit. It's the thing, if he just took a breath, took a beat and just side-footed it through, it could find its way through the legs of the defenders, and, that could easily end up in the goal. If you blast it over the bar, like, that's never going in, no matter, in any situation. So yeah, it's frustrating. It really is. It was a bit of an off day. Kippo, as Andersen, I thought, a lot of people have been kind of saying that since he's come back from injury, he's been a little bit off beat. And it's weird because, like, Bassi was so good yesterday, really, really solid. And Andersen, although he's not doing too much wrong, he's not giving away sort of goal leading errors, but at the same time, he's a little bit off the pace. You think it's just a case of match fitness, that he's just getting back up to full speed? Because there's been a few performances now where he's not up to his usual very, very high standards.
I hope so. I like Andersen, to be clear. I think that, I think we all agree Diop was incredible filling in for him when the time he was gone. Perhaps it was unfair to him to have him be dropped. I think that was a little bit un-Silva-like, the way Andersen came back into the side, based on historical precedent. And I think Andersen's always been a competent, perhaps not incredible defender. And I don't think his defending, strictly speaking, has been atrocious. I think it's been kind of what you get from him. I think his special sauce was always his distribution. I think that is what set him apart from sort of the run-of-the-mill defensive qualities he offered you. And that, I think, is where it was glaring to me yesterday. We know he can ping a diagonal, and he has done, and we've seen it. And I think his distribution yesterday, whether it was short passes, but particularly, I think I could count 4 or 5 sort of long balls played out that were just straight up turnovers. I mean, they were just bombed long into either space where no one was there, or worse, right to a red shirt. And in a match where we're looking for every opportunity we can to kind of get things going and build out from the back, you can't be giving away balls like that. And look, like, our defense held up. So essentially you want to ask, why was it such a stalemate? Why was it, frankly, I think in my opinion, such a boring affair for long parts of this match? And it's because if our defending is going to be solid, but then we're not going to actually do anything and build from it. And I think a lot of that does come down to Joachim's distribution, because also we have a system that relies on him to be that initial distributor. He is sort of the first step, the first building block on what we want to build attacking wise. And when that's not coming off, it's glaring, it's obvious. And on a certain level, it all could have been redeemed. The late header from the corner, I thought, was really kind of well touched by him.
Yeah. And
that's just a great piece of defending by United. So credit where it's due. But no, I mean, I thought, and to your point, juxtaposed with Bassi, who I thought was immense yesterday, made his appearance a bit more glaring. But I personally am not ready to bring back Issa. I think that, at his best, Andersen brings a lot to this side. It's also we've committed a lot financially to the guy. And until we write this past summer off as a wash, but I don't think we're close to doing. I'm still game to give him at least a few more shots at it. And if not, then we can reevaluate.
Yeah. AF, we've spoken about Bassi, who was impressive. Any other encouraging performances for you that you'd like to give a nod to, so it's just not all doom and gloom before we wrap up this half?
First half, Sander Berger. Game 2 halves for me. But first half, Sander Berger. I remember thinking about 20 minutes into the game, God, we're good when we've got him in the side. Like the differences between him and Lukic is that, Sander can kind of receive the ball on a half turn. He will turn players and he's suddenly running at your team. And for a guy that he just doesn't look athletic, but suddenly he's taken like 3 or 4 strides and he's passed half of their midfield. That's something that, he's still bringing his way back up to fitness, second game back. I'm excited about the future of that pivot because it does give us a different element, and it means that we have to see less of a 10 having to play back in the 8 role. It's lovely having 2 8s. I know Drew's got some great articles on why it's great to have 2 8s in the Fulham team. But this is what we saw yesterday for the first 20, 30 minutes before it kind of fell apart a little bit. So I'd say that's a positive from my side. I could also say it's a bit of an under the radar one, but we said on the Thursday Club last week that if we can keep Ahmad quiet, Robinson's done his job. Now, I would say for the majority of the game, he was really quiet, but you barely noticed he was there, to be honest. And I think I would probably say that's Robinson doing his job. So whilst it wasn't necessarily his best performance in terms of attacking, it's similar to his kind of performance against Liverpool, Robinson, that, he kept Salah pretty quiet, but it wasn't necessarily his best attacking output. It was really the same yesterday. His attacking output wasn't the best, still making the overlaps. Fair play, got one hell of an engine on him. But he did really well at keeping one of the Premier League's, I guess, hot young stars out of the limelight. He didn't look like he was really in the game until the end as well. So fair play to Anthony Robinson, as per usual.
I would echo that. I thought ESR had an encouraging showing as well. Again, maybe not the lofty heights that we fully expect from him, but I think we're moving in the right direction with ESR, and I think that more game time will only see him go from strength to strength. Right. I think all factors considered, I think we're pretty much agreed. Boring game, should have been a draw. We were unlucky. They were there for the taking. Let's move on. We've got some very tricky games coming up as well, so hopefully a return to our form that we showed earlier in the season will be coming soon. Right, we're going to answer some of your questions next. Welcome back to the Fulhamish podcast. I'm joined by Drew, Charlie, Kip and AF. We've had so many questions from you listeners regarding the... It's a bit of a melting pot of questions that I do believe are all interlinked, and mainly around the atmosphere and the ticketing situation surrounding yesterday's game. So Fulham announced on the Saturday before the Sunday kickoff that the game had just sold out. And that had come from off the back of a somewhat embarrassing advertisement in London's newspapers saying that tickets were still on sale and whatnot. And yeah, so I'm sorry, but I personally believe that to sell out Manchester United at home, I know they're not a big club anymore, but still it's Manchester United, the day before kickoff is a little bit kind of embarrassing. And I think that ultimately this comes down to how much the tickets were. So I've got the list here. The cheapest adult ticket in the Hammersmith end was £67 yesterday. If you want to get the premium Riverside, which is the higher end, it's 160 quid. The cheapest ticket in the Riverside stand was £150 yesterday for an adult. The cheapest ticket in the whole of the ground for an adult, besides the sort of family end of the Johnny Haynes, which is right on the ends, which are incredibly limited, I really hasten to add, which are £35, but we're talking about a couple of hundred there. I just feel like that is contributing to an atmosphere where you have a lot of tourists coming, where you're pricing out fans who've been coming to Fulham, proper fans, I would say, home supporters. And just reading out some of these questions that we've had, of which there have been many, So Julianne says, is there such thing as a home advantage and are we in danger of losing it? Claire Green, we've had a neutral stand. Do we now have a neutral ground? Why is the ground so quiet? That's from Zav. Slimy Toad says, would like to hear opinions on ticket pricing and away fans clogging up the entire Riverside stand. Now, I saw a lot of United fans in the ground yesterday from the Hammersmith ends. Yaz, who's a contributor, sits right in the row in front of me, was sat next to a Manchester United fan who was so blatantly filming a close-up of Bruno Fernandes throughout the whole game. It was absolutely infuriating. Drew, from where you were sat, did you pick up on this sort of feeling around the ground?
I didn't have any United fans near me in the middle of H5, which I was glad about because I was very much in the mood to expose and eject. It's that question, isn't it? You know, that you just read out. We have a neutral stand. We had a neutral stand. Do we now have a neutral ground? And it's like, it's not just the big clubs. It's not just the Liverpools and the Uniteds buying home buying home tickets and sitting in there. It's this whole, played out ticket price debacle. It's this us and them mentality that they've managed to engender where the season ticket holders have got decent enough value tickets that it's this us and them thing now where it's like, well, I'm not bothered because I got my season ticket. If you're that loyal, then you buy a season ticket, not understanding that there's nuances to this whole thing. There are people who are, loyal fans who don't necessarily live in London who can't go every week but want to go every so often. There's nuances to the debate, and it's been reduced to an us versus them thing, and all of this contributes. And then you've got Alistair Mackintosh. I'm not going to call him Ali Mac because he's not my bloody mate. I don't like him. Alistair Mackintosh sat in the cottage balcony with Infantino, who's just another cancer on the game, and Mackintosh is a cancer on the club. And it's about time that we started calling it out for what it is, and it'll never go because for somebody like Shad Khan, he's a trusted hand to Khan who doesn't have to worry about the day-to-day runnings of the club. Yes, the mandate is passed down from Shad to say make the club sustainable. How Alistair Mackintosh does that himself is left largely up to him. We all know, we've been here before, when we're back playing Preston at home on a Tuesday night in December, and we've got 11,000 people in the cottage rattling around this once lucrative members club. What's going to happen then? All of our season tickets will be cheaper, but there'll be nobody to fill the rest of the ground. So we've seen it before. We know what happens. Yes, we're not in the doldrums of a Mike Ashley gripped on Newcastle where everything's suffering on and off the pitch, but we're in trouble. And something has to change. And the attitude of the fan base has never been a one of trying to change things, and that's the shame. So you're shouting into the ether, but I'll continue to shout until I'm blue in the face. And it's just nights like last night is just symptomatic of a wider issue.
Well said, Drew, mate. Well said. There was nothing more infuriating than seeing the highlights and seeing the camera cut to Alistair Mackintosh sat next to the spherical dome, grinning dome of Gianni Infantino, corrupty dumpty. And I was like, you couldn't write it. You really couldn't write it. Like everything that Infantino's doing to destroy the game that we love and everything Alistair Mackintosh is doing to destroy the club that we love. He's an accountant, right, who's been told to balance books to make as much profit as possible, and he is ripping the soul out of this football club. We had a comment on YouTube from Paul Munster who says the current Prem strategy of not giving a flip about home fans, flip in inverted commas, I'm sure there's a word he would rather have used there, about home fans and turning it into a tourist circus is killing the soul of the game. It's way better going to away games because everyone around you actually wants to be there and supports the same bloody team. It was brilliant at the King Power last week. Contrast last night to a family who must have spent 500 quid for the game sitting next to me doing Wordle. Like, it just about says it all, really. And then Samuel P13 commented, said, had a fan of Myro walk in with a Spurs shirt in his bag from their official club shop. It's got to a point now where something's got to give because it's like, it's just, Silva has said time and time again that he wants Craven Cottage to be this fortress and to have this atmosphere that we have had. Like upon the previous spell that we had in the Premier League, that was what it was. Yes, we've always been a family club. Yeah, we're not like Stoke or anything like that where it's a cauldron of noise. We've never been that kind of club, but we have had a solid fan base. It's because historically we've put emphasis on being a family club, having cheap season tickets that will allow people to come when they're young and then they become fans throughout the rest of their life. What they're doing at the moment is so incredibly short-sighted, and people are starting to realize that it's going to bite us in the arse eventually. You're seeing more and more articles in broadsheet newspapers that are being published about the ticketing crisis at Fulham. When I talk to friends who support other clubs, it's one of the first things that they bring up, and it's just heartbreaking. It really is. I mean, Charlie, you're following Fulham from across the pond, from the States, and I know that this kind of thing, it may seem to you like £160 I gather in the States isn't all that much to watch a football game. So I'd be really interested to hear your take, because obviously you hear it from our point of view, and then your experience of viewing sport in the States is a lot different. So I mean, how do you kind of sit with it from a US based Fulham fan?
I've had to learn a lot, candidly. I feel like I've had to read and listen and force myself to understand the perspective of Fulham supporters, in the sense of the week in, week out, day in, day out Fulham supporters, which I am a supporter. I'm just not one who can attend. And I think there is I would speak, globally, there is a massive network of Fulham supporters around the globe who may never or seldom get the chance to attend the Cottage. But what I can really speak to is the notion of in American sport, there is no away end. There's no, it's just, you sit, you buy a ticket. It doesn't matter who you cheer for. It's kind of sort of just knowing that, if I'm a fan of an NFL team and my team are playing on the road, I just buy a ticket and go, and no one will sort of, you walk through, and it's just, especially there's certain fan bases, Dallas Cowboys, these big teams who, no matter where they're playing, they are going to represent 20 to 30%, if not more, of the fans in attendance. And it does at times lead to conflict. What I don't understand, what I don't pretend to understand, is sort of the 80s and 70s and the hooliganism component, and why the fans are separated the way they are separated. And I don't pretend to. But it's one I find fascinating. I mean, I've been sat dozens and dozens of times in my life next to supporters of the team who my team is playing against. And it sucks. I don't enjoy it, but it's interesting because here we just accept it as a byproduct of the reality. And so I really appreciate kind of you guys sharing all these perspectives. And frankly, I'm just sort of here to listen. But like I said at the beginning, whether you are or aren't somebody who can regularly attend the Cottage, it certainly is in everyone's interest to ensure that the product we're putting on the pitch and the support that product is receiving from the fan base is the best it can be. And it doesn't feel like it is right now. And by the way, last note is I felt like it was very much Darth Vader, Lord Sidious vibes sitting there in the Cottage yesterday between Alistair Mackintosh and like, oh yes, so my young Padawan, we will teach you the ways of evil. You must master the dark side. And it was just infuriating to look down upon.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Charlie, but on the Fulhamish group chat, you described it as a nightmare blunt rotation, and it's a sentiment that I very much share. I mean, AF, have you got anything to add on the atmosphere, ticketing, tourism debate? Because I know we've been on about it a lot of Fulhamish, but it's something that I feel like we all feel pretty strongly about at the moment.
I definitely do. I mean, I can add my perspective as a fan of the Johnny Haynes stand and some of the things that have changed this season for me since the Riverside has opened. Fulham has become a theme park. The problem is what's happened is they've just gone for every single game which every game is on TV abroad, right? Let's show this new standoff like it's the most amazing thing that we've ever seen. They will put pyrotechnics in front of it. They've cranked up the music so it can be heard on TV. What is this for the fans that are in there? So we're talking about fan experience. They're doing this just to be like, look, it's got fans in it. Doesn't it look amazing? The fact they're getting full price for those tickets eventually, they love that too. What does it do for the fans that are in there? As soon as the game starts, the problem is that all TV stations automatically, they dim the crowd noise anyway, so you can hear the commentary and so that people can focus on the game. You don't really get a true sense of what it's like. So I don't think people are noticing the difference on TV. In the ground, it's noticeable. game starts, people are basically disinterested. I've seen so many fans around me that have bought tickets towards the front of the Johnny Haynes stand that, as you were saying, some people are playing Wordle. I've seen people sitting there and they're literally filming the opposition side. They're on their phone, they're on FaceTime. They're just happy to be at a Premier League game, but they don't really care about what's going on in the game. So you don't get the same ebb and flow. It means that from me enjoying the actual game, I'm not thinking, oh, do you know what? I'm going to get so excited about this chance, because there's a genuine chance that if Fulham score, I might be about 1 in 40 people around me that actually jump up. It does change your involvement from being in an away end where absolutely every person there loves Fulham Football Club. I've been going to Fulham for the last 20 years, and this is the first time where I've started to feel like, hey, am I sure I'm at like a home end? Am I sure that this is our home stadium? Because it doesn't feel as though I'm not sitting in a neutral end some of the time. And if that's where it starts now, when the Riverside is opened, I'd hate to see where we end up in 2 years, because some of the responses to, the Fulham Supporters Trust engagement with Alistair Mackintosh and others has been dismissive at best. That is a really light term to use. They don't care about what the fans have to say, because ultimately, as you say, accountants looking at balance sheets and they say, yeah, I'm happy with that one. Are you happy with it? Yeah, fan satisfaction is all up from the fans that we've asked, the 10 people that we put on a board. Yeah, it sounds great. But really, when you're in a game and you're trying to enjoy it, Fulham fans don't enjoy it in the same way that they used to, regardless of what's going on the pitch. It's just not as exciting.
Yeah, and Marco Silva's mentioned this as well. He's talking about it. It's not just us as fans being like, oh, the atmosphere. Like, it's genuinely filtering down to the players and the performance of the team.
The one other thing that made me laugh about your comments, AF, is also that if they are trying to prioritize showing this glorious, fully sold out Riverside stand, as someone who's consumed every game ever on television, all you were ever seeing is the Putney, the Haynes, and the Hammersmith. That's it. Unless there's like 1 or 2 cutaways like done as a replay. So I chuckle that their notion is to show off this brilliant Riverside stand, which in a 2 or 3 hour broadcast will legitimately be shown for like 45-ish seconds. And so it boggles the mind that they want to like be proud and fill this thing out when the global audience is not consuming it, literally, like in a very literal sense. I heard you saying that and it made perfect sense, and I was just dying inside. I'm like, I can't remember the last time I saw the Riverside on TV. So go figure.
Yeah, obviously a lot of strong opinions flying around. Let's move on. Let's put this conversation to bed for at least until the next home game, I suppose. We've got another question here. I'm going to chuck this one to you, Drew, from Mike Levy, who asks, we're hearing rumours again of a Silva release clause, especially with Spurs' form, obviously lost against Leicester this weekend, and his contract winding down. When managers move, you typically don't hear about the fee paid. Is 8 million fair compensation if he goes? Feels low to me, but was just curious what others think. Also, I'm a little bit concerned about the surname of the fellow who came in with this question, Mike Levy. What do you think, Drew? Personally, I think that if Spurs are to part ways with Ange, they're going to be looking probably over to the Bournemouth boss ahead of Silva. I don't know. That would feel like the kind of natural. I don't know. I would lie if I was saying that I wasn't worried about this. Ange does look like a dead man walking a little bit. But yeah, I guess the point is the compensation. Personally, I feel that Marco Silva is worth way more to this club than 8 million. I'm not sure exactly where this figure's been pulled from. I don't know whether it's anything that you've heard about the kind of compensation if he was to go. But where do you stand with this?
Well, I think Marco Silva fits the Spurs profile in terms of the manager that they go for. I think if you were a club that didn't make the same mistakes as Spurs always make, then maybe you would go for a Bournemouth manager. But I think Marco fills that void. He's a Premier League manager. He has been for years. He's got that sort of level of recognisable. He's a recognisable coach. I think they probably would go for him. I think compensation for managers is fairly new. It's not like player transfer fees. So it's probably a sort of finger in the air to figure out what's worth what to what club. But considering, I think many of us have wondered how close Marco is to the end of his journey at Fulham. Maybe it's the summer, maybe not. Then 8 million's probably fine, especially as we're safe, you would think, this season, bar an absolute capitulation. So I don't know really. It's the wrong day to ask me, Coops, because I'm just flatter than a pancake. But I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was 8 million. I don't want it to happen. I'm still of sound enough mind to say that, but yeah, who knows? It would be quite. It wouldn't be a surprise.
I put this in the Fulhamish group chat the other day, and I still have this niggling suspicion that Silva is waiting for the biggest job in the Premier League. That minute, you could argue, is the Man City job when Pep goes. I just feel as though he's waiting for something that is set ready for him. If whether Man City would go for him, that's a completely different kind of option. But I look at the Spurs project, and it's kind of similar in some ways to the Chelsea project, and someone picking that one up. You look at it and you go, it's a bit of a poison chalice. Marco hasn't jumped ship so far, and he's probably had opportunities from Saudi for money, so it's not a money perspective. But if you're looking at a project to completely change, Spurs isn't bad. But you're not going to necessarily be like, do you know what? I'm going to get all the money I need to do what I need to do. I've got a really sustainable club that's up here. He's got Daniel Levy that he's got to work for. And is it really going to be much of a departure in a positive light from the Ange Postecoglou era? I don't think it's the approach that should be taken. I would be heartbroken if his Fulham journey ended by going to Spurs. There's so many people that go to Spurs: Moussa Dembele, Clint Dempsey, Ryan Sessegnon. I just don't want another one, be it a manager, to end his Fulham time, go there and realise, do you know what, it wasn't greener on the other side and I shouldn't have gone to North London.
But these athletes and these managers and all these people involved in the game, they have that mentality which has served them well in their careers, that they will, doesn't matter what's happened before, they can change what's happened. So he would go to Spurs in a heartbeat, guaranteed.
Got a few other questions here on Josh King. Charlie, I should throw this to you. So essentially, a lot of the themes of these questions are on, is it time to see Josh King? So Steve Whittaker says, I know it's been said before, but is Newcastle away? Perhaps Wigan, the time to see a full dose of Josh King? Things looked awfully stale up front yesterday, and Josh has been a handful in his cameo appearances. Do you agree, Josh King? Could we see more of him?
I think we should see Josh. He is a player. He is the star boy of the academy right now. It is for any healthy club. Promotion from the academy to the first team is a path that needs to be viable. It cannot be consistently blockaded. I think Wigan does represent a good opportunity because he's not a charity case. It's not like, oh, let's give him a run out. It's a case because he deserves to be on the pitch. And I think I speak, sort of conclusively when I say that. And I do, as a quick pivot, think that the Wigan match is vital because this does, and I know I'm echoing the words of one Sammy James, where we have a cup run in us, and this feels like a team that, if we are going to be mid-table, but we are the kind of team who can lose to anybody, but also beat anybody on a given day. It feels like, with behind Marco, putting a real effort into the cup would be in our best interest in a way to really kind of salvage the season. But at a macro level, yes, on the Josh part, I do wonder if the 10 feels a bit congested. I know, Karen has been playing more in the 8, but essentially to have a room of ESR, Pereira, now Josh, and then arguably Kearney, despite what Drew said earlier about depth, which I do think we are in desperate need of across other areas of the pitch, it's a bummer that the one area Josh is trying to poke through at is where it does feel like there's a bit of a kind of a depth struggle. But in general, I think efforts should be made to kind of get him on because it's, again, like I said, it's not a charity case. I genuinely think he can contribute. Yeah,
it would be great to see him feature against Wigan. It's our second game after Newcastle away, which is this coming weekend. Hopefully we'll see. We haven't had the best luck at St James's Park over recent times. Who will forget the infamous Mitrovic penalty amongst other calamitous moments, but who knows? Maybe we can get some sort of result, but I guess time will tell. But we'll be back on Thursday. Sammy and Jack will be covering all of the sort of latest club news, previewing that Newcastle game, and yeah, much more. So all that's left for me to do is to thank my guests. Drew Heatley, thank you very much for joining, sir.
Cheers, Coops.
Thank you, Charlie Kipp, live from the USA. It's great to have you on, man.
What's the point of dreaming if you're forced to live like this?
And thank you, AF. We've got, would you like to choose a 3-word review to name this abomination?
Yeah, I mean, it is exactly how we felt, probably sounded for this entire podcast. So we're going to go with Topias Ninivara with deflected and deflated.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great week, everyone. hopefully be a bit more of a cheery Thursday club, but we do appreciate you listening. Yeah, come on you Whites. See you soon.